George Strait, the king of country music, changed the business with his raw, daring sound that fans couldn't get enough of. Over 70 million records have been sold in the US and an amazing 120 million around the world. But even kings and queens have to fight. Strait has had a lot of success, but in her personal life, she has had a lot of pain and sadness. Some of the saddest parts of his life happen with his family, especially with his son. What took place behind the scenes? The truth might make you unable to speak. Let's learn about George Strait's life and find out what his son's story is. Before he became famous, George Strait wasn't in the spotlight. George was born on May 18, 1952, in Poteet, Texas. He grew up in Pile, a small town in southern Texas. John Strait, his father, was a math teacher and ran a huge 2,000-acre family ranch at the same time. But George's early years were far from perfect. When he was in grade school, his parents split up. Bud and George stayed with their dad and helped out on the ranch when they were young. That life wasn't all work. It gave him the grit and drive that would make him who he is today. George fell in love with music when he was in high school. At Peel High, he joined a rock band called the Stoics, which took a lot of ideas from the Beatles. Later, George admitted, "The Beatles were huge. I listened to them a lot, along with all the popular bands at the time." When he was a teenager, he played in other rock bands, though he admitted he wasn't a very good guitarist. Interestingly, he didn't even know about country music at the time. After a year at Southwest Texas State University, George did something brave. He eloped with Norma, his high school sweetheart. They got married in a small private ceremony, out of sight of everyone else. Soon after, in 1971, George joined the U.S. Army and was stationed in Hawaii, where his relationship with music began to change. As he played the guitar and sang in his spare time, George Strait slowly fell deeply in love with country music. He was inspired by the timeless voices of country music legends like Hank Williams, George Jones, Merle Haggard, and especially Bob Wills, whose Western swing style captivated him. In 1973, while he was still in the military, George joined an Army-based band and took his first real step into country music. A turning point that began his journey in the genre. After finishing his service in 1975, George went back to Southwest Texas State University to finish his degree in agriculture. While he was there, a simple flyer advertising a local country band called Stony Ridge changed everything. George joined the group and quickly became the lead singer. Soon, he changed their name to the Ace in the whole band, which set the stage for something truly amazing. Their high-energy shows and hard work earned them a loyal fan base. They had a fan base and even played for big bands like the Texas Playboys. That Don't Change the Way I Feel About You and I Can't Go On Dying Like This were two of George's original songs that the band recorded for the Houston labeled records as their fame grew. Unfortunately, these early recordings didn't do well. To make money, George worked on his family's ranch during the day and pursued his music dreams at night. It seemed impossible for George to break into the bigger music business because he didn't have any connections and kept failing. But things changed when Irv Woolsey, a bar manager who had worked at a major record label, saw George's talent and became interested in his career. Irv Woolsey set up a trip for Nashville executives to come to Texas to see the Ace and the whole band perform live. The executives liked the music, but they thought the band's Western swing style was out of date and too risky to be commercially successful. They left without making an offer, which was disappointing for George and the band. George didn't give up, so he made several trips to Nashville and pitched his music to label after label, but he was turned down every time. There wasn't much room for traditional country music in a pop-driven industry, and executives didn't think his style would sell. The constant no's started to wear him down, and he almost quit music altogether. He took a job designing cattle pens and planned to leave the band behind. But George's wife, Norma, didn't want him to give up on his dream. She told him to keep going for one more year, not letting doubt win. Her unwavering faith paid off. In February 1981, George Strait signed a modest deal with Mecca Records, which started the career that would make him famous. George would release a single, and if it did well, Messiah would think about giving him a full album deal and a longer contract. Later that year, he released his first single, Unwound. The song instantly became popular with listeners and quickly rose to number 6 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. Its undeniable success convinced Maxey to take the plunge and give George a full album deal, which marked the beginning of his rise to fame. During this huge change, George's best friend stood by his side the whole time. Over the next 10 years, George released more than 12 albums, and each one sold over 1 million copies, which was an impressive feat that not many artists could match. Could match. His first album, Strait Country, released in 1981, was a welcome break from the pop-influenced country music that was popular at the time. George's first #1 hit was on the album Straight from the Heart, 1982, which also had the title track. Critics couldn't get enough of George's music, calling it a return to the roots of real country music. By 1984, he had an amazing 17 #1 hits, including 5 straight toppers from albums like Right or Wrong and Does Fort Worth Ever Cross Your Mind? Fort Worth Ever Cross Your Mind? In 1983, George took another big step into the spotlight when he made his famous debut at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. George got his big break at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo when he filled in for Edie Rabbit, who got sick. Rabbit sick. That performance started a great tradition, and George has since performed there more than 20 times, bringing over 1 million fans to his shows. In 1985, George had already made a name for himself as a major force in country music. And that year, he won the CMA Award for Best Male Vocalist and released his first Greatest Hits album. His 1985 album, Something Special, went straight to #1 and featured the unforgettable hit single, The Chair. In 1986, George won the CMA Award for Male Vocalist of the Year again and released his 4th consecutive #1 album. However, 1986 was also the worst year of George's life. He and his wife Norma were very proud of their 2 children. A girl named Jennifer, who was born on October 6, 1972, and a son named George Harvey Strait Jr., who they affectionately called Bubba. Jennifer Strait, 13, was killed in a terrible car accident. She was a passenger in a car being driven by Gregory Wilson Allen, 18, of Staples, Texas. The car flipped over because it was going too fast and wasn't being handled properly, ending the Strait family's lives forever. Jennifer wasn't wearing a seatbelt and was thrown out of the car and died instantly. Her death was one of the worst and most painful times in George and Norma's lives. George was so upset that he pulled away from the public eye after the tragedy. He avoided interviews and wouldn't talk about the horrible event for a whole year. He didn't care about fame or attention from the media anymore. George later explained, "After I lost my daughter, I became even more private. Really, I didn't want to talk to anyone who wasn't close to me. I thought the worst would not happen. That's why I chose to do things my own way." Even though George was going through a lot of pain, he didn't let it stop him from making songs. Even though he was going through a hard time, he found a way to keep acting, putting all of his feelings into his work, and sharing his voice with fans. Music became George's safe place and a way for him to deal with his terrible sadness. From 1986 to 1989, he had 11 straight #1 hits, which is an amazing record. Nobody in their right mind would have left her was the first game in this amazing streak. Ace in the Hole was the last. Ace in the Hole was the last. Every song on the album went to the top of the charts. Oceanfront Property, for example, was the first country album to ever start at the top of the charts. George was definitely on a high at the end of the 1980s. He won the CMA Entertainer of the Year award in 1989 and again in 1990. The start of the new decade showed that George had no plans to slow down. When his 10th studio record, Living It Up, came out in 1990, it had 2 huge hits, Love Without End and I've Come to Expect It From You. George became a true country music icon when both songs stayed at the top of the charts for an amazing 5 weeks each. 4 weeks, George's style changed a lot with the record Chill of an Early Fall, which came out in 1991. Fans liked the change, and Entertainment Weekly pointed out that he got out of his comfort zone. Hits like If I Know Me and You Know Me Better Than That were on the record. His amazing run of 31 straight top 10 hits ended with his cover of Lovesick Blues, which reached number 24. Even with this problem, the record still did very well and made it to number 4 on the charts. It did end his run of 8 straight records that were number 1 on the charts though. George's album Holding My Own came out in 1992. It didn't have a number 1 song, but it did have 2 top 5 hits. In the same year, George's career went in an exciting new way. He tried acting, which broadened his ideas, and showed how versatile he was as an artist and performer. George's first movie role in Hollywood was in Pure Country, 1992, which showed off his acting skills as well as his singing skills. A lot of famous songs were in the movie, like I Cross My Heart, Heartland, Where the Sidewalk Ends, and The King of Broken Hearts. These songs became fan favorites very quickly, making him an even bigger country music star. George launched a groundbreaking collection called Straight Out of the Box in 1995. It was a 4-disc set that went viral. It is the best-selling box set in the history of country music, with over 5 million copies sold. This shows how much of an impact he had on the genre. When the late 1990s came around, George was still at the top of the charts. He had a string of hit albums, starting with Blue Clear Sky in 1996 and continuing with Carrying Your Love With Me in 1997 and One Step at a Time in 1998. These albums solidified his reputation as one of the best country music artists of all time. George's last album of the 1990s was Always Never the Same, which came out in 1999. Among other things, it got to number 2 on the country lists and number 6 on the Billboard 200. Even though reviewers had mixed opinions, Entertainment Weekly praised George's unique style for turning even the silliest songs into hits. By the end of the decade, George had an amazing 17 number 1 hits on the Billboard Country Air charts, making him one of the best artists in the genre. Even bigger steps forward came in the 2000s. It was released by George in September 2000 and was called George Strait. It had hits like Go On If It's Going to Rain and She Took the Wind. The record quickly went platinum because fans loved it so much. The same year, President George W. Bush gave George the National Medal of the Arts. Bush, a prestigious award that recognizes his huge influence on society and music. Country music fans fell in love with George's record Somewhere Down in Texas in 2005, especially the duet Good News, Bad News with Lee Ann Wack. The song won the CMA Award for Musical Event of the Year. After a year, George marked 30 years in the business by putting out It Just Comes Natural, which showed that his music was still relevant today. It Just Comes Natural had 15 brand new songs, 2 of which were written by George's close friend and collaborator, Dean Dillon. It didn't take long for critics to praise George's work with USA Today, which showed how consistently good his music is. One writer said it all very well. George Strait is one of the best country music singers ever. What showed George's song, Wrapped hit the top of the Mediabase 247 country music charts in 2007. It was his 55th number 1 single, which is an impressive feat that not many people can match. From January to April of that year, George went on a huge 23-show arena tour, where he shared the stage with Ronnie Milsap, a legend, and Taylor Swift, a growing star. George showed that he was still the most powerful person in country music, even after decades in the business. In 2008, he put out the album Troubadour, which went straight to the top of the country album charts and made him even more famous. Everyone across the country loved I Saw God Today, the first song from Troubadour. It went straight to number 1. George won a lot of awards at the CMA that same year. His album Troubadour won Album of the Year, and his single I Saw God Today won Song of the Year. Things got really good for George in 2009. He won his first Grammy Award for Troubadour and was named the Academy of Country Music's Artist of the Decade, which was a fitting award given his huge impact. Then, in September 2012, George told everyone something sad. The Cowboy Rides Away tour, which will end when his record Love Is Everything comes out in May 2013, will be his last tour. That year, his single, Give It All We Got Tonight, went straight to number 1, making it his 60th number 1 song. This made him the undisputed king of country music. This amazing achievement broke Conway Twitty's record of 40 number 1 hits on Billboard's Hot Country Songs chart. It also made George Strait the artist with the most #1 songs in all types of music. His success wasn't limited to the #1 songs on the charts. People told stories about his shows, which had cool 360-degree stage setups and a festival-like vibe that fans loved. George won his third CMA Entertainer of the Year award in late 2013, while on his Cowboy, Rides Away tour. Fly It Away tour. This shows how dominant he still is in the business. He began the second part of his Goodbye tour on January 9, 2014, with Jason Aldean, Miranda Lambert, Little Big Town, and Tim McGrath, among other famous artists. The tour came to a close with a record-setting show at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, on June 7, 2014. An event that everyone will never forget that cemented George's reputation as the famous king of country music. For the first time ever, over 104,000 people came to AT&T Stadium to see George Strait's farewell tour finale. It was the biggest indoor show in North America. The Rolling Stones show at the New Orleans Superdome in 1981 was not as big as this event. Not only did the event break records for attendance, it also made an amazing $18.01 million, which is a new record for a single country concert. A few years later, on June 15, 2024, George broke even more records with a single show. A huge crowd of 110,000 people came to see the show at Kyle Field at Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. The previous record for most people attending a solo show in the U.S. was 107,019, set by the Grateful Dead in New Jersey in 1977. It also broke Kyle Field's record of 110,633 fans, which had been held since a 2014 football game between Texas A&M and Ole Miss. George Strait proved once more why he is known as a true star in the world of music. George Strait wasn't just a cowboy in his songs, he really lived. Many of his fans didn't know how much ranching was still a part of his daily life in South Texas, even though they knew he worked on his father's land as a child. George liked taking care of cattle, riding horses, and even participating in rodeos as a team roper. He didn't just do farming for fun, it was his way of life. George and his brother Buddy started the George Strait Team Roping Classic more than 20 years ago. It quickly became one of the biggest events in the rodeo world. George raised steers just for the race. He wasn't doing it to make money. It was a work of love that came from the love his father taught him. He passed on that same love to his son, George Jr., who everyone calls Bubba. Bubba did well in high school rodeos and on the rodeo team at Texas A&M University, just like his father did. George was so proud of his son that he said, "I love doing everything with my son." Bubba's love for rodeo only grew, and he proudly carried on the family practice. When Bubba Strait joined the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, he took his love of rodeo to a whole new level. He competed in many events, including the 22nd annual George Strait Team Roping Classic in 2004. But there were some tough times in his work as a roper. He had to take a break from racing for a while after an accident almost cut off his index finger. Even after this setback, Bubba's commitment to rodeo never waned, which only made his bond with his father stronger. Rodeo has always been an important part of the Strait family history. George put on the George Strait Team Roping Classic for 35 years, but in 2017 he stopped holding it. When George talked about how much he loved the sport, he told Team Roping Journal that racing with Bubba made him feel the most proud. His words, "There's nothing like watching my son compete or win a roping," showed how happy and proud he was to share this interest with his son. George said, "I'm sure I'm a lot more nervous watching than he is competing. Winning a few buckles together has been the best thing that's ever happened to me." Bubba would rather not be the center of attention, but he loves music just as much as his dad does. His singing was even on the opening song of George's 1992 movie Pure Country, called Heartland. Bubba made more and more musical contributions to the family as he got bigger. Living for the Night and Out of Sight, Out of Mind were the first songs he co-wrote with George for his 2009 record Twang. He got better at writing songs as he worked on records like Here for a Good Time, Love is Everything, Cold Beer Conversation, and Honky Tonk Time Machine. George says that working with Bubba reignited his own love for writing songs, which gave his music career new life and inspiration. Family members, including the father, have written some of George's most famous songs together. Bubba really encouraged me to write again. George said, "It's been amazing to see him grow as a songwriter. He loves it. He's playing guitar so well. Working with him at this point in my career has been a real blessing." Bubba has proudly stood by his father at many important events over the years. In 2007, he went to the Country Music Hall of Fame medallion ceremony. In 2009, he went to the Academy of Country Music Awards with George and saw his father win the award for Artist of the Decade. In 2012, Bubba went to Nashville with George to celebrate the 50th annual ASCAP Country Music Awards, which was another big moment in their shared love of music. One of the most memorable times they had together was at the last stop of George's Cowboy Rides Away tour in Arlington, Texas, in 2014. An emotional and memorable night. At the last stop of the Cowboy Rides Away tour, Bubba joined his father on stage to sing Arkansas Dave, a song he had written himself. It was the highlight of the night and marked the end of George's touring career. The unforgettable concert was recorded for CMT George Strait. The emotional farewell was shown on the live special, The Cowboy Rides Away. Unlike his famous father, Bubba doesn't like to share details about his personal life on social media. However, his wife Tamara Strait often posts pictures of their life on Instagram. Tamara met Bubba in 2005 while she was a silver dancer at a San Antonio Spurs game. In 2010, they got engaged, and in December of that year, they got married. They have 2 children together, George Harvey Strait III, born in 2012, and Jillian Louise Strait, born in 2016. Raising a Strait family. Tamara once wrote an emotional Instagram post about her thoughts on marriage and parenting. She wrote this before she became a parent. "Marriage is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's not always easy, but I'm so grateful for a husband who loves me no matter what, supports my work, and shares my faith." Their son Harvey has already had some memorable times in the spotlight with his famous grandfather. At the Houston Rodeo Show, he joined George on stage to sing God and country music, which made the crowd laugh. Later, during Game 6 of the 2022 World Series, Harvey, his sister Gillian, Tamara, and their grandmother Norma stood proudly with George on stage. George and Harvey led the crowd in the electrifying play ball call while wearing Houston Astros hats and jerseys. It was a moment that perfectly showed how close the Strait family is across generations and how deeply they are connected to music, sports, and tradition. In an interview with Cowboys and Indians in 2022, George Strait talked about his grandson, Harvey's growing interests. He said that Harvey likes playing the drums but is currently more interested in baseball, hunting, and fishing. George also talked about his granddaughter Jillian's interest in singing and how her voice already sounds good. "I'll always back them in whatever they want to do," George said. George Strait's rise from a boy from a small town in Texas to the king of country music is a story of grit, passion, and persistence. George Strait never gave up on his dreams and craft, even when bad things happened in his personal life or at work. His legacy inspires fans all over the world and reminds us all of the power of perseverance and dedication. Beyond his legendary career, George Strait's unwavering love for his family, especially his son Bubba, shows his strong values and grounded spirit. George has a long history that goes beyond music. He has had hit songs, loved ranching his whole life, and was deeply interested in rodeo. His journey has made him not only a music legend, but also a symbol of honesty and determination. For many fans, he's more than just a star. He's the undeniable king of country music, a title he has earned through decades of hard work and passion.